The champagne glass trembled in my hand as my sister Dakota flaunted her marble kitchen island worth more than my entire yearly salary. "Sage, darling, you simply must see the master bathroom," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. 20 guests watched as she paraded me through her mansion like a charity case. But what she didn't know was that I had just discovered the truth about how she afforded this palace. Tonight wasn't about her housewarming celebration, it was about her downfall. Hey, beautiful souls! Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers worldwide. If you're ready for some serious family drama with the most satisfying justice-served moment, smash that like button and hit subscribe because Dakota's comeuppance is going to be absolutely legendary. 3 weeks before Dakota's housewarming invitation arrived, I was cleaning out our late mother's house when I found the documents that changed everything. Hidden behind a loose floorboard in Mom's bedroom closet were financial statements, bank transfers, and legal papers that painted a horrifying picture of family betrayal. My name was Sage Winters, a 32-year-old elementary school teacher from Portland, Oregon. While I had always struggled financially working 2 jobs to make ends meet in my tiny studio apartment, my older sister Dakota had seemingly struck gold. She was 35, married to a successful surgeon named Marcus, and they lived in what I thought was their dream home in the hills overlooking the city. But those documents revealed the ugly truth. Dakota had been systematically embezzling money from our mother's estate for the past 5 years, even before Mom's death from cancer. She had manipulated our elderly mother into signing over power of attorney, then slowly drained her accounts, sold her valuable jewelry and artwork, and even took out loans against the family home using forged signatures. The trail was extensive and damning. Bank statements showed regular transfers from Mom's accounts to Dakota's personal and business accounts. There were receipts for luxury purchases, vacation expenses, and even the down payment for Dakota's mansion, all funded by money stolen from our mother's life savings and inheritance that should have been split between us. Mom had saved over $400,000 throughout her lifetime, working as a seamstress and living modestly to ensure her daughters would be financially secure. She had also inherited valuable antiques from our grandmother, including a collection of Victorian jewelry worth at least $50,000. All of it was gone, funneled into Dakota's lavish lifestyle. The most heartbreaking discovery was Mom's own handwritten notes tucked between the official documents. She had started to suspect something was wrong in her final months, but was too weak from chemotherapy treatments to confront Dakota directly. In shaky handwriting, she had documented strange phone calls about accounts she didn't remember opening and signatures she didn't remember making. "I think Dakota is taking my money," one note read. "She says it's for my medical bills, but the amounts don't match what the doctors told me. I'm scared to say anything because she's been so helpful with everything else." Another note dated just 2 weeks before Mom's death was even more devastating. "Found bank statement in kitchen drawer. Dakota withdrew $10,000 yesterday. When I asked her about it, she got angry and said I was confused because of my medication. Made me feel like I was losing my mind. Maybe I am. But Mom wasn't losing her mind. She was being systematically robbed by her own daughter, who exploited her vulnerability during the most frightening time of her life. Dakota had positioned herself as the devoted caregiver while simultaneously stealing everything Mom had worked for. The evidence showed that Dakota had been forging Mom's signature on financial documents for years. She had convinced Mom to add her name to various accounts for emergencies, then used that access to drain them systematically. She had even convinced Mom to update her will, giving Dakota control over the estate and reducing my inheritance to practically nothing. While I was working double shifts at the school, and my weekend job at a bookstore barely scraping together enough money to visit Mom during her cancer treatment, Dakota was living it up on stolen funds. She had painted herself as the successful daughter who had made it, while portraying me as the struggling younger sister who couldn't get her life together. The mansion, the luxury cars, the designer clothes, the expensive vacations she constantly posted about on social media, Everything was purchased with money that belonged to our dying mother and should have been part of both our inheritances. I sat in Mom's empty house surrounded by boxes and memories and felt a rage so pure and focused that it frightened me. This wasn't just theft, it was elder abuse, financial manipulation, and the cruelest form of family betrayal imaginable. Dakota had not only stolen money, she had stolen Mom's peace of mind in her final months, making her question her own memory and sanity. The housewarming invitation, which had arrived the day after I found the documents, suddenly took on an entirely different meaning. Dakota wasn't just showing off her new mansion, she was flaunting the proceeds of her crimes, rubbing my face in the wealth she had stolen from our family while I struggled to pay my bills. But Dakota had made one crucial mistake. In her arrogance and greed, she had kept detailed records of everything. Every forged document, every illegal transfer, every piece of stolen property was meticulously documented in the files I now possessed. She had created a complete paper trail of her own crimes. As I carefully photographed each document and organized the evidence, I realized that this housewarming party wasn't going to be the humiliation Dakota had planned for me. Instead, it was going to be the perfect venue for her public downfall. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove straight to downtown Portland to meet with attorney Rebecca Martinez, a family law specialist, who had helped my friend Sarah through a difficult divorce. Rebecca's office was modest but professional. Nothing like the flashy law firms Dakota's stolen money could have afforded her. But Rebecca had a reputation for being thorough and relentless when fighting for her clients. This is one of the most comprehensive cases of elder financial abuse I've seen, Rebecca said after reviewing the documents for over an hour. Your sister didn't just steal money, she created an elaborate fraud scheme that involved identity theft forgery and what appears to be coercive control over a vulnerable adult. Rebecca explained that Dakota's crimes weren't just civil matters that could be resolved with a lawsuit. They were serious felonies that could result in significant prison time. The systematic nature of the theft, the exploitation of an elderly person with a serious illness, and the sophisticated methods Dakota used to cover her tracks all pointed to premeditated criminal activity. We need to involve law enforcement immediately, Rebecca advised. But first, we should gather additional evidence and build an airtight case. Your sister is obviously intelligent and resourceful, which means she's going to fight back hard when she realizes she's been caught. Over the next 2 weeks, Rebecca and I worked together to build a comprehensive case against Dakota. We hired a forensic accountant named David Kim, who specialized in tracing stolen assets and uncovering financial crimes. David was a quiet, methodical man who approached the case like a puzzle he was determined to solve. The forensic accounting revealed even more disturbing details about Dakota's crimes. She hadn't just stolen the obvious assets, she had been skimming money from Mom's medical expense account, taking cash that was supposed to pay for physical therapy, prescription medications, and home healthcare services that Mom desperately needed during her cancer treatment. Your mother was essentially paying for her own financial abuse, David explained grimly. Dakota was using your mother's money to fund the very activities that were stealing from her. The investigation also uncovered evidence that Dakota had been manipulating Mom's medical care to maximize her access to financial accounts. She had discouraged Mom from seeking second opinions about her cancer treatment, isolated her from friends who might have noticed the financial irregularities, and even convinced Mom to stop seeing her longtime accountant, who might have detected the fraud. We discovered that Dakota had taken out several credit cards in Mom's name after her death, using her social security number and personal information to continue stealing even after the funeral. She had also filed false insurance claims and had been collecting social security benefits that should have stopped when Mom died. The total amount stolen was staggering. David calculated that Dakota had taken over $600,000 from Mom's estate over the course of 5 years, including the inheritance that should have been mine, the proceeds from selling Mom's house and personal belongings, and the ongoing theft that continued after Mom's death. But the financial crimes were just part of the story. Rebecca helped me understand that Dakota had also committed emotional and psychological abuse against our mother. The notes Mom had hidden showed a pattern of gaslighting and manipulation designed to make her question her own memory and judgment. Your sister isolated your mother, made her dependent, and then exploited that vulnerability to steal everything she owned, Rebecca explained. This kind of elder abuse is particularly heinous because it attacks the victim's sense of reality and self-worth while simultaneously destroying their financial security. As we built the case, I began to understand how Dakota had been manipulating me as well. She had always positioned herself as the successful, responsible older sister while making me feel like the family failure. She had discouraged me from visiting Mom too frequently, claiming that my presence stressed her out, and that Dakota could handle everything better on her own. During Mom's illness, Dakota had controlled most of the information about her condition and treatment. She had told me that Mom's medical expenses were manageable and that insurance was covering most of the costs. She had made me believe that Mom was financially stable and that there was no need for me to worry about her money. All of those conversations took on a sinister new meaning now that I understood Dakota was actively stealing from Mom while maintaining the facade of being her devoted caregiver. She had used my trust and my grief to keep me away from the truth. Rebecca and I decided that the housewarming party would be the perfect opportunity to confront Dakota publicly and begin the process of holding her accountable for her crimes. The guest list for the party included several people who had known our mother well, including family friends, former neighbors, and colleagues from the sewing circle where Mom had spent her Saturday mornings for over 20 years. Public exposure is often the most effective way to prevent additional crimes and to encourage other victims to come forward, Rebecca explained. Your sister has probably been telling people for years that she's successful and self-made. When they learn that her lifestyle was funded by elder abuse and theft, it will be devastating to her reputation and her social standing. We also plan to use the party as an opportunity to serve Dakota with legal papers and to make it clear that we had substantial evidence of her crimes. Rebecca believed that confronting Dakota in front of her friends and social circle would prevent her from simply denying the charges or claiming that the evidence was fabricated. People like your sister rely on maintaining a certain image, Rebecca said. When that image is shattered publicly, they often make mistakes or admissions that strengthen the case against them. The plan was risky, but it felt appropriate. Dakota had used public humiliation as a weapon against me for years, always making sure that other people witnessed my supposed failures and inadequacies. Now, it was time to turn that weapon back on her. As the party date approached, I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation that I had never experienced before. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to confront Dakota from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. I had the truth, I had evidence, and I had legal support. The scared, struggling little sister that Dakota had always seen was about to become her worst nightmare. The week before Dakota's housewarming party, I realized I needed more than just legal evidence to ensure justice would be served. I needed witnesses, allies, and people who could help me navigate the social and emotional aftermath of what was about to unfold. Rebecca had warned me that exposing Dakota publicly would likely result in a vicious counterattack, and I needed to be prepared for the storm that was coming. My first ally came from an unexpected source. While researching Dakota's social media presence to understand who would be attending the party, I discovered that her husband Marcus had been liking and commenting on posts from a woman named Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a cardiologist at the same hospital where he worked. Their interactions seemed overly friendly for professional colleagues. On a hunch, I created a fake social media account and began following both Marcus and Elena's activities more closely. What I found was evidence of an affair that had been going on for at least 8 months. They were careful not to post pictures together, but their travel patterns, restaurant check-ins, and even workout locations matched perfectly on dozens of occasions. I reached out to Elena through a mutual acquaintance, claiming I was concerned about a friend who was married to someone having an affair with a doctor. Elena was initially defensive, but when I explained who I was and showed her some of the evidence about Dakota's financial crimes, her attitude changed dramatically. "I had no idea Marcus was married to someone like that," Elena said when we met for coffee. "He always painted Dakota as this superficial, materialistic woman who was obsessed with status and appearance. He said she was emotionally distant and that their marriage was essentially a business arrangement." Elena revealed that Marcus had been planning to leave Dakota for months, but was worried about the financial implications of a divorce. He had told Elena that Dakota controlled most of their assets and that she had threatened to ruin him financially if he ever tried to leave her. "Marcus is going to be devastated when he learns that his wife's money came from stealing from her dying mother," Elena said. "He's actually a really decent guy who got trapped in a marriage to someone who turned out to be a complete fraud." Elena agreed to help expose Dakota's crimes partly out of guilt about the affair, but mostly because she was genuinely horrified by what Dakota had done to our mother. She also provided me with additional insight into Dakota's personality and behavior that would be useful during the confrontation. My second major ally was Mom's former neighbor, Mrs. Patricia Hoffman, an 80-year-old retired nurse who had lived next door to Mom for over 15 years. Patricia had always been suspicious of Dakota's sudden wealth and had made several attempts to check on Mom's financial situation during her illness. "Your sister always made me feel like I was interfering when I tried to help your mother," Patricia told me. "She would schedule all the medical appointments when I wasn't available to drive, and she discouraged your mother from accepting help from anyone else in the neighborhood." Patricia had kept detailed notes about Dakota's behavior during Mom's illness, including dates and times when Dakota had prevented other people from visiting Mom or had made decisions about Mom's care without consulting anyone else in the family. Her observations corroborated the pattern of isolation and control that Rebecca had identified as typical in elder abuse cases. More importantly, Patricia had witnessed several incidents that would be crucial evidence in the criminal case against Dakota. She had seen Dakota forging Mom's signature on documents, had overheard phone conversations where Dakota pretended to be Mom when talking to banks and insurance companies, and had even caught Dakota loading valuable items from Mom's house into her car on several occasions. "I should have said something sooner," Patricia admitted tearfully. "But your sister was so convincing, and your mother seemed to trust her completely. I didn't want to cause family drama if I was wrong about what I was seeing." Patricia agreed to provide a sworn statement about what she had witnessed and to testify in court if necessary. Her credibility as a longtime neighbor and retired healthcare professional would be invaluable in establishing the pattern of abuse and manipulation. My third ally was someone I had never expected to hear from: Dakota's former business partner, Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer had co-owned a boutique marketing consultancy with Dakota for 3 years before their partnership dissolved acrimoniously in what Dakota had described as a creative differences situation. Jennifer contacted me after seeing a social media post where I had subtly hinted about family financial irregularities without mentioning Dakota by name. Jennifer recognized the situation immediately because she had her own suspicions about Dakota's business practices and financial ethics. "Dakota was stealing from our business accounts," Jennifer revealed. "She was creating fake invoices, inflating expense reports, and even billing clients for work that was never performed. When I started asking questions, she turned our entire client base against me and forced me out of the business." Jennifer had kept copies of financial records from their business partnership that showed a pattern of fraud and embezzlement very similar to what Dakota had done to Mom. The methods were almost identical, creating false documentation, manipulating accounting records, and using her position of trust to steal money systematically. "The scariest part was how good she was at making everyone believe her version of events," Jennifer said. "She convinced our clients that I was the problem, that I was trying to sabotage the business out of jealousy. By the time I realized what was really happening, she had isolated me from everyone who might have supported me." Jennifer's evidence would be crucial in establishing that Dakota's crimes against Mom weren't a one-time aberration, but part of a long-term pattern of fraudulent behavior. It would also help prosecutors argue for a harsher sentence by showing that Dakota was a serial offender who had been committing financial crimes for years. The fourth member of my alliance was David Kim, the forensic accountant Rebecca had hired to analyze Dakota's financial crimes. David had become personally invested in the case after discovering the extent of Dakota's theft from our dying mother. This case is going to be a landmark prosecution for elder financial abuse, David explained. The documentation is so comprehensive and the crimes are so egregious that it will likely result in significant legislative changes to protect elderly victims. David had uncovered additional evidence that Dakota had been part of a broader network of people who specialized in exploiting elderly and vulnerable adults. She had connections to several other individuals who had been convicted of similar crimes, and there were indications that she had been sharing techniques and strategies with other fraudsters. My final ally was the most important one myself. Over the course of building this case, I had transformed from a struggling, insecure woman who always felt inferior to her successful older sister into someone who was confident, focused, and absolutely determined to see justice served. I had spent my entire adult life believing that Dakota was everything I wasn't: successful, confident, financially secure, and socially sophisticated. Learning that her entire lifestyle was built on theft and elder abuse had initially made me angry, but it had ultimately made me stronger. For the first time in my life, I had something that Dakota didn't have: the moral high ground and the power to hold her accountable for her actions. I was no longer the struggling little sister who needed Dakota's approval or acceptance. I was the person who was going to expose her crimes and ensure that justice was served. The night before the housewarming party, I met with my entire team of allies to review our strategy and make sure everyone understood their role in what was about to happen. Rebecca would handle the legal aspects. Elena would provide insight into Marcus's likely reactions. Patricia would serve as a credible witness to Dakota's past behavior. Jennifer would establish the pattern of criminal conduct, and David would present the financial evidence in terms that everyone could understand. I would be the one to confront Dakota directly and to make sure that everyone at the party understood exactly what she had done to our mother. It was going to be the most difficult thing I had ever done, but I was ready. Dakota had spent years building her reputation as the successful, generous, family-oriented woman who had made it through hard work and smart decisions. Tomorrow night, that carefully constructed image was going to crumble completely, and everyone who had ever admired or envied her was going to learn the ugly truth about how she had really funded her lifestyle. The scared little girl who had always looked up to her big sister was gone forever. In her place was a woman who was about to serve the coldest, most satisfying revenge anyone could imagine. The housewarming party was in full swing when everything went wrong. Dakota had outdone herself with the event: elegant catering, live music, and a guest list that included some of Portland's most influential people. The mansion was perfectly decorated, every surface gleaming under crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my annual salary. But none of that mattered now because my carefully planned revenge was falling apart. I had arrived fashionably late, wearing my best dress and carrying a leather portfolio containing copies of all the evidence against Dakota. Rebecca was positioned near the main entrance, Elena was mingling with the medical professionals in attendance, and Patricia had stationed herself near the kitchen where she could observe everything that happened. The plan was simple. I would wait until Dakota gathered everyone for her traditional house tour and thank you speech. Then I would present the evidence of her crimes in front of all her friends and colleagues. The public humiliation would be devastating, and the witnesses would ensure she couldn't simply deny the charges or claim I was lying out of jealousy. But 20 minutes into the party, Jennifer Walsh pulled me aside with devastating news. "Sage, we have a problem," she whispered urgently. "Dakota knows we're here, and she's been talking to people all evening about you. She's telling everyone that you've been having mental health issues since your mother's death, and that you've been making wild accusations about the family finances." My heart sank as Jennifer explained that Dakota had been systematically discrediting me to every important guest at the party. She had positioned herself as the concerned older sister who was worried about my delusional behavior and my inability to accept our mother's death. She's been showing people text messages that she claims are from you, Jennifer continued. Messages where you supposedly threaten her and make bizarre accusations about stolen money. The messages look completely unhinged. I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized what Dakota had done. She had created fake text conversations that made me look like an unstable, grief-stricken woman who was lashing out at her successful sister. The messages were sophisticated forgeries that included my phone number and writing style, but the content was deliberately erratic and threatening. But the betrayal ran deeper than just Dakota's preemptive strike. Jennifer's expression told me there was more bad news coming. "There's something else," she said reluctantly. "Elena isn't who you think she is. She's been working with Dakota this whole time." The world seemed to tilt sideways as Jennifer explained that Elena Rodriguez wasn't actually having an affair with Marcus. She was Dakota's friend and co-conspirator, someone who had been brought in to manipulate me into revealing my evidence and strategy. "Elena has been reporting back to Dakota about everything we discussed," Jennifer said. "She knows about the forensic accounting, the legal case, the witness statements, everything. Dakota has been preparing for this confrontation for weeks." I felt physically sick as the full scope of the trap became clear. Dakota had somehow learned about my investigation, possibly through social media monitoring or private investigators, and had orchestrated an elaborate counter-strategy designed to destroy my credibility before I could expose her crimes. Elena approached us at that moment, her expression no longer sympathetic and supportive. Instead, she looked cold and calculating, like someone who had successfully completed a difficult assignment. "I'm sorry it had to be this way, Sage," she said with fake sincerity. "But Dakota is my client and she needed to protect herself from what she described as a malicious harassment campaign by an unstable family member." The betrayal was complete. Elena wasn't a cardiologist having an affair with Marcus. She was a private investigator who specialized in reputation management and crisis communication for wealthy individuals facing family scandals. Dakota had hired her to infiltrate my alliance network and to gather intelligence about my plans. "Dakota knew you would try something like this eventually," Elena explained. "She's been monitoring your social media activities and noticed when you started asking questions about financial records. She hired me to get close to you and find out exactly what evidence you thought you had." I realized that every conversation with Elena had been an intelligence-gathering operation. She had been recording our meetings, documenting my evidence, and reporting back to Dakota about my emotional state and mental stability. The information I had shared with Elena in confidence had been used to craft the perfect counter-narrative that portrayed me as an unbalanced woman who was jealous of her sister's success. But the worst betrayal was yet to come. As I stood there reeling from Elena's revelation, I saw Rebecca Martinez across the room, talking animatedly with Dakota, and a man I didn't recognize. Rebecca's body language wasn't confrontational or professional. It was friendly and collaborative. Jennifer followed my gaze and sighed heavily. "Rebecca isn't on our side either," she said quietly. "She's been Dakota's attorney all along. The entire legal consultation was a setup to find out what evidence you had and to assess the strength of your case." The room felt like it was spinning as I processed the magnitude of the deception. Rebecca Martinez wasn't the family law specialist who was going to help me seek justice for Mom's abuse. She was Dakota's defense attorney, someone who had been hired to protect Dakota from exactly the kind of legal challenge I was mounting. "Every document you shared with Rebecca, every strategy you discussed, every piece of evidence you thought was secret. Dakota has known about all of it from the beginning," Jennifer explained. "Rebecca has been preparing Dakota's defense while pretending to help you build your case." I felt completely defeated and utterly alone. The two people I had trusted most completely had been working for Dakota the entire time. They had manipulated me into revealing my entire strategy, had gained access to all my evidence, and had been helping Dakota prepare her counterattack for weeks. But there was one more devastating revelation still to come. As I watched Dakota work the room, I realized that even David Kim, the forensic accountant, wasn't who he claimed to be. The man I had seen Dakota talking to earlier was the real David Kim, Dakota's actual accountant. someone who had been helping her move and hide stolen assets rather than uncovering them. The forensic accounting that had revealed the extent of Dakota's crimes was completely fabricated. The reports that showed systematic theft and elder abuse were sophisticated forgeries, designed to make me believe I had a strong case when I actually had nothing. Jennifer was the only person who hadn't betrayed me, but she was also the least important member of my alliance. Her evidence about Dakota's business fraud was real, but it was minor compared to what I thought I had uncovered about Mom's estate. Standing in Dakota's gleaming mansion, surrounded by her wealthy friends and successful colleagues, I realized that I had walked directly into a trap that had been months in the making. Dakota had anticipated my investigation, had compromised. My legal team had fabricated evidence to make me overconfident and had positioned me to be publicly humiliated in front of everyone who mattered. The scared, struggling little sister who thought she had finally found the strength to confront her powerful older sister had instead been played like a complete amateur. Dakota wasn't just a thief, she was a master manipulator who had turned my desire for justice into the perfect weapon to destroy my credibility permanently. As Dakota called for everyone's attention to begin her house tour and thank you speech, I realized that I was about to become the cautionary tale she would tell for years to come, the unstable younger sister who had tried to destroy her out of jealousy and mental illness. Everything I had worked for, everything I had hoped to achieve, was about to crumble in the most public and humiliating way possible. Dakota had won again, and this time the victory was going to be absolute and permanent. Just as Dakota raised her champagne glass to address her guests, a woman I had never seen before walked through the front door with the confidence of someone who belonged there. She was in her mid-40s, professionally dressed, and carried herself with the kind of authority that made people instinctively step aside to let her pass. "Excuse me," the woman said loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "I'm Agent Sarah Morrison from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and I need to speak with Dakota immediately." The party fell silent as Agent Morrison flashed her credentials to the room. Dakota's face went completely pale, but she managed to maintain her composure as she approached the federal agent. "I'm not sure what this is about," Dakota said with forced calm. "But surely this could wait until after my party. My guests—" "Your guests are actually perfect witnesses for what I'm about to discuss," Agent Morrison interrupted. "Dakota, you're under arrest for elder financial abuse, identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud." As Agent Morrison began reading Dakota the Miranda rights, I felt Jennifer grab my arm tightly. "Sage," she whispered urgently, "I need to tell you something. I wasn't completely honest about why I contacted you." My head was spinning from the sudden turn of events, but I managed to focus on Jennifer's words as she explained that she had been working undercover for the FBI for the past 6 months as part of a larger investigation into elder financial abuse networks. "The FBI has been building a case against Dakota for over a year," Jennifer revealed. "We knew she was part of a sophisticated fraud ring that targets elderly victims, but we needed someone close to the family to help us gather evidence and understand her methods." Agent Morrison continued her arrest procedures while Jennifer explained that the FBI had been monitoring Dakota's activities through multiple sources, including banking surveillance, insurance fraud investigations, and tips from healthcare workers who had noticed suspicious patterns in their elderly patients' financial situations. "When you started your own investigation into your mother's finances, we realized you could be the key to building an airtight case," Jennifer said. "But we also knew that Dakota was dangerous and that she would try to discredit you if she suspected what you were doing." The elaborate betrayal I had just experienced wasn't actually a betrayal at all. It was a carefully orchestrated FBE operation designed to make Dakota overconfident and to encourage her to reveal additional evidence of her crimes. "Rebecca Martinez is a real attorney, but she's been working with us to document everything Dakota said and did during your consultations," Jennifer explained. "Elena Rodriguez is a real doctor, but she's also an FBI consultant who specializes in psychological profiling of financial criminals. Even David Kim is real. He's the FBI's top forensic accountant. As Agent Morrison led Dakota toward the front door in handcuffs, Jennifer continued explaining the scope of the federal investigation. Dakota wasn't just a lone criminal who had stolen from her dying mother, she was part of an organized network that had defrauded dozens of elderly victims out of millions of dollars over the past decade. "Your mother wasn't Dakota's first victim," Jennifer said grimly. "We've identified at least 15 other elderly people who were systematically robbed by Dakota and her associates. The methods were always the same: gain the victim's trust, isolate them from other family members, obtain power of attorney, and then drain their accounts systematically." The fake evidence that had made me think I had a strong case against Dakota wasn't fake at all. It was real evidence that the FBI had been gathering for months. The financial documents, the forged signatures, the pattern of theft and abuse were all genuine, but they represented just a small fraction of Dakota's actual crimes. "We had to make you think your allies had betrayed you because we knew Dakota was monitoring your activities," Jennifer explained. "If she had realized that the FBI was involved, she would have destroyed evidence and fled the country. She had escape plans prepared and offshore accounts ready." Agent Morrison returned to address the stunned party guests, many of whom were still holding their champagne glasses and staring in disbelief at the scene unfolding in front of them. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand what you've witnessed tonight," Agent Morrison said clearly. "Dakota has been arrested as part of a major federal investigation into elder financial abuse. Over the past 5 years, she has stolen over $2 million from elderly victims, including her own dying mother." The room erupted in shocked conversations as guests began to understand that they had been socializing with a federal criminal and that the luxury surrounding them had been purchased with money stolen from vulnerable elderly people. But Agent Morrison wasn't finished. She produced a thick folder of documents and began reading from a prepared statement that detailed the scope of Dakota's crimes and the evidence the FBI had gathered. Dakota used her position as a trusted family member to exploit her mother's vulnerability during cancer treatment. Agent Morrison continued. She forged legal documents, stole jewelry and artwork, took out fraudulent loans, and even continued stealing from her mother's estate after her death. Marcus, Dakota's husband, looked completely devastated as he learned that his wife was not only a federal criminal, but had been funding their lifestyle through elder abuse. Several guests began leaving immediately, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the scandal that was about to become front-page news. Agent Morrison then addressed me directly. "Sage, I want to thank you for your courage in pursuing this investigation, even when you thought you were facing it alone. Your determination to seek justice for your mother made this prosecution possible." Jennifer handed me a second folder containing the real evidence that would be used to prosecute Dakota. Unlike the fabricated documents I thought I had been working with, these files contained overwhelming proof of systematic criminal activity that would almost certainly result in a lengthy federal prison sentence. "The FBI has recovered over $400,000 in stolen assets that will be returned to your mother's estate," Agent Morrison explained. "We've also identified additional victims whose families will finally have closure and financial recovery." But the most satisfying moment came when Agent Morrison revealed that Dakota's criminal network had been completely dismantled. The investigation had led to the arrest of 12 other individuals who had been working with Dakota to exploit elderly victims across multiple states. "This case is going to result in new federal legislation to protect elderly Americans from financial abuse," Agent Morrison said. "Your mother's suffering will help prevent thousands of other families from experiencing the same trauma." As the last of the party guests fled the mansion, I realized that everything I had hoped to achieve had been accomplished beyond my wildest dreams. Dakota wasn't just going to be publicly humiliated, she was going to federal prison for a very long time. The money she had stolen from Mom would be recovered and returned to the estate, and her crimes would be used to create stronger protections for other vulnerable elderly people. The scared, struggling little sister who had walked into this party thinking she was about to be destroyed, had instead witnessed the complete collapse of her criminal sister's empire. Justice wasn't just being served, it was being served with the full weight and authority of the federal government behind it. Dakota's reign of terror was finally over, and the truth about her crimes would ensure she could never hurt another elderly victim again. 6 months after Dakota's arrest, I sat in the federal courthouse in Portland, watching my sister receive a sentence of 12 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The judge had been particularly harsh because of the vulnerable nature of Dakota's victims and the sophisticated methods she had used to exploit their trust. The defendant showed a callous disregard for the suffering of elderly victims, including her own dying mother, Judge Patricia Chen stated during sentencing. This court finds that the defendant poses a continuing danger to vulnerable members of our community, and that a significant period of incarceration is necessary to protect the public. Marcus had filed for divorce within weeks of Dakota's arrest and had been completely cooperative with the FBI investigation. It turned out that he genuinely had no knowledge of Dakota's crimes and had been kept in the dark about the true source of their wealth just as effectively as I had been. "I feel like I was married to a complete stranger," Marcus told me after the sentencing hearing. "The woman I thought I knew would never have hurt an elderly person, let alone her own mother. I'm still struggling to understand how I could have been so completely deceived." The financial recovery had been even more successful than Agent Morrison had initially predicted. The FBI had recovered over $800,000 in stolen assets, including jewelry, artwork, and real estate that Dakota had purchased with money taken from her various victims. My inheritance from Mom's estate was fully restored, along with additional compensation for the emotional trauma Dakota's crimes had caused. But the money, while important, wasn't the most significant outcome of the investigation. The case had led to the creation of the Elder Financial Protection Act, new federal legislation that strengthened penalties for financial crimes against elderly victims and created better reporting mechanisms for healthcare workers and financial institutions to identify potential abuse. "Your mother's story is going to save lives," Agent Morrison told me at the sentencing hearing. "The publicity from this case has already led to dozens of families coming forward with similar situations, and several other criminal networks have been identified and dismantled." More importantly, the experience had completely transformed my relationships and my understanding of what family really means. The people who had stood by me during the investigation, Jennifer, Patricia, Agent Morrison, and even Marcus, had become closer to me than Dakota had ever been. Jennifer and I had developed a genuine friendship that extended far beyond the FBI investigation. She had helped me process the emotional trauma of learning that my sister was a criminal and had been instrumental in helping me rebuild my sense of self-worth and confidence. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met," Jennifer told me over coffee a few weeks after the sentencing. "Most people would have been destroyed by what Dakota put you through, but you turned it into an opportunity to seek justice for your mother and protect other families." Patricia, Mom's former neighbor, had become like a grandmother to me. She shared stories about Mom's younger years that I had never heard, and helped me understand that Mom would have been proud of my determination to hold Dakota accountable for her crimes. "Your mother always worried that you were too trusting and too willing to see the best in people," Patricia told me. "But those same qualities are what gave you the strength to fight for justice when it really mattered. She would be so proud of the woman you've become." Even Marcus had become an unexpected source of support and friendship. Our shared experience of being deceived by Dakota had created a bond that neither of us had anticipated. "We were both victims of Dakota's manipulation," Marcus explained, "but we chose to respond with integrity and honesty instead of denial and anger. That says something important about who we are as people." The most significant change in my life was my new career path. Agent Morrison had offered me a position with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, working specifically on cases involving elder abuse and family financial exploitation. "You have a unique perspective and set of skills that would be invaluable in this work," she explained. "You understand the emotional dynamics of family abuse, you know how to build trust with victims, and you have the determination to see cases through to completion." I had accepted the position and was currently in training at the FBI Academy in Quantico. The work was challenging and emotionally demanding, but it felt like the most meaningful thing I had ever done with my life. My first case as an FBI trainee involved a situation very similar to what had happened with Mom and Dakota. An elderly man in Seattle was being systematically robbed by his adult daughter, who had convinced him to sign over power of attorney and was draining his retirement accounts to fund her gambling addiction. Using the skills I had learned from my own experience, I was able to build trust with the victim and his other family members, gather evidence of the financial abuse, and ultimately secure a conviction that resulted in the recovery of over $300,000 in stolen assets. "You have a gift for this work," my supervisor told me after we closed the case. "Victims trust you because they can see that you understand what they're going through. That's not something that can be taught, it has to be lived." The experience with Dakota had taught me that family isn't defined by blood relationships or genetic connections. Real family consists of people who support you during difficult times, who celebrate your successes without jealousy, who tell you the truth even when it's painful, and who stand by you when you need to do the right thing. My chosen family now included Jennifer Patricia Marcus, Agent Morrison, my FBI colleagues, and several of the other victim families I had met during the investigation. These relationships were based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine care for each other's well-being qualities that had never existed in my relationship with Dakota. Looking back on everything that had happened, I realized that Dakota's crimes had ultimately led to the best possible outcome for everyone except Dakota herself. The elderly victims and their families had achieved justice and financial recovery. New legislation would protect future victims from similar abuse. And I had discovered my true calling in life while building meaningful relationships with people who genuinely cared about me. Dakota had spent her entire adult life trying to prove that she was superior to everyone around her, especially me. She had measured success in terms of money status and material possessions, all of which she had obtained through crime and exploitation. But true success, I had learned, comes from using your experiences, even traumatic ones, to help other people and make the world a better place. It comes from building relationships based on honesty and integrity rather than manipulation and deception. And it comes from having the courage to fight for justice even when the odds seem impossible. Dakota would spend the next 12 years in federal prison stripped of her wealth, her status, and her freedom. Meanwhile, I would spend those same years building a career dedicated to protecting vulnerable people and seeking justice for victims of financial crimes. In the end, the scared little sister who had always felt inferior to her successful older sister had achieved something Dakota never could: the respect of her peers, the satisfaction of meaningful work, and the love of a chosen family who valued her for who she truly was, rather than what she could provide for them. Have you ever discovered a shocking family secret that completely changed how you saw someone you thought you knew? What would you do if you found out a family member had been stealing from your elderly parents? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts on family loyalty versus doing the right thing. If this story of justice and karma resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life revenge stories, and share this video with anyone who believes that family betrayal should never go unpunished. Thank you for joining me on this journey of uncovering the truth and seeking justice. Remember that sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up teaching us the most important lessons about strength, integrity, and what family really means.